Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so it's time to put the power steering bracket back on, the power steering pump, the power steering fluid reservoir, and the alternator, and some of these power steering cooler lines. The easiest and the best way to do this is to separate the power steering pump from the power steering pump bracket. It's held on with four 13mm bolts. Later we'll retorque these to 18 foot-pounds. These four larger bolts that hold the power steering pump bracket on get torqued to 37 foot-pounds of torque. So let's get started. So we are going to bolt the bracket to the driver's side cylinder head. I had cleaned out those bolt holes. I made a video earlier. Let me just show you something about the bolts on this bracket. It's important that you know this. So you have four bolts that hold it on. 1, 2, 3, 4. This bolt right here, the bolt closest to the pulley, is shorter than the other three. And see, this is one of the other three. The threads go all the way up the bolt. These don't, and this bolt on this, the threads on this bolt don't go all the way up, and this bolt's about 1/4 of an inch shorter. The reason being is the bolt hole that goes into the cylinder head isn't as deep as these three, probably because it runs into one of the intake or exhaust ports, so that's why. So this is the shortest bolt, so make sure you don't put a longer one in here and then you torque it all the way down. You'll probably punch a hole through the head. So this is your shortest bolt, the one closest to the pulley. Alright, so let me put the camera down and I'm going to hand tighten these. And then I'll explain why this is the easiest way to do this job. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. In typical hot rodding fashion, the factory power steering pump bracket / alternator bracket does not want to fit back onto the motor. The bracket actually bolts directly to the cylinder head, not to the block. What's happening is the bracket is hitting the bottom of the cylinder head. Okay, I think you might be able to see right there in the center. See that little angled part? It's hitting the cylinder head. So I'm going to have to grind that down. So it lines up flush at the top, but it won't line up flush there or at the bottom. And you can see it kind of rocks. So this corner is the problem. I guess I'll have to grind that down. I don't know how it's going to affect it. I have to put this on the bench and look at it more carefully. I'll be back. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this portion out. I took a black marker and just basically try to help show you guys. I'm going to basically cut that out, so I'll cut it or grind it this way and then this way. Just got to take this portion out. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I had to put this piece on, take it off about 10 times, and I actually wound up having to remove a lot of material. Let me see if I can show you what the problem area was. Look, I don't know if you could see back there. Okay, you can see now that there's plenty of clearance over here. Right down, right there. So there's plenty of clearance this way, and then there's plenty of clearance along this way. Let me see. I'll take the bracket off and show you. Give me a second. Alright, so you get an idea of how much material I had to remove. I just used my angle grinder, took it right off pretty easily, just like that and like that. However, I was trying not to take off too much material, so I kept, taking a little bit off at a time and put it back on the vehicle. So now it's about an hour delay, so let's get back to it and try to achieve our goals for today. This is the kind of crap I wish they would tell you about when you're buying it. I have a hard time believing that I'm the first guy with a Corvette alternator power steering pump bracket that had to do this. But you never hear about it. Nobody posts it online. You don't really see videos like this. So this is one of the reasons why I'm trying to make my videos so detailed. So, forgive me if they're long, but it's for reasons like this. I want to try to help you guys out and give you guys advance warning. All right, let me get back to it. I'll be back. Okay, so I have the bracket just hand tight, finger tight for now. I'm actually going to try to hook up the two power steering lines that go down here to the steering gear, because once the bracket's in with the power steering pump and the pulley, there's like no room. So I'm gonna thread these in and get them tight now while I have some room. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I took the power steering bracket off. It was only hand tight. It took me a couple of seconds, and I started with the two power steering hoses. They're 18 millimeter. They're both torqued down to 22 foot-pounds. I had to use a crow's foot. Start off with this one. Install this one first and torque this one down, the one closest to the driver's side frame. And then do this one. Again, 22 foot-pounds. I had taken pictures. I had mentioned earlier I take pictures and video of everything before I take anything apart, just so I have a reference. I couldn't remember the order of the hoses, which way they went, which one went under, which one went over, and luckily I did, and I got them situated correctly now. So they're both torqued down to 25 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to probably put the power steering pump back into the bracket. And then before I bolt that down, or actually maybe, because you don't have good access to this line that goes into the bottom of the power steering pump. So actually, let me see how I'm going to do this. Should I install the bracket first, or should I do the pump first, then the bracket? I'll figure it out. Let me do a little research here, and I'll get back to you guys. All right, bye-bye. Okay, so I installed the line to the bottom of the pump off to the side, and there goes another bolt. And I'm going to rest it like that for now. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to rest it like that. Now I'm going to come with the bracket. I'm going to torque the 4 bolts down to 18 foot-pounds on the bracket off to the side. Then I'll slide it in place. So let me do that. Again, you have 4 13 millimeter bolts torqued to 18 foot-pounds. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so I got it assembled off to the side. I torqued the bolts to 18 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to slide it in between the brake module and the cylinder head. All right, I'll be back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the power steering pump and bracket assembly is in. The 2 hoses down there are torqued. I was able to torque all of these down to the proper torque specs. With the 2 top ones, you could use just a ratchet socket with the torque wrench. For the 2 bottom ones, right there and right back there, I was able to get it with the torque wrench and a crow's foot, 15 millimeter. So let me just show you how, in case people are like, no, you can't do that. Basically just like that. And over here, same thing. All right. So now I'm going to put the power steering fluid reservoir on, connect it to this hose, and then put the alternator in, and we're done with this for today. All right, I'll be back. Let me show you how I'm doing this. So I got the reservoir, it slides down that bracket. I've got vice grips holding the clamp, and as I slide it down onto the bracket, I will feed the hose onto the nipple, release the clamp, and that's it. Alright, I'll be back. And it's done. Okay, so now we're just going to slide the alternator back in place, and that'll be it for today. Remember, you don't have enough room on this particular vehicle to slide the alternator down in between the bracket and the coolant reservoir, so you have to slide it in this way and pull it out this way, and then it's just held on with 2 bolts. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So I got the alternator in. It's just held in with these 2 bolts. We got one here and one right there. Remember, on my particular vehicle, you can't just drop it in this way because it hits the coolant reservoir, so you have to slide it in like this and remove it like that as well. Give me 1 second. If you guys recall, you heard me saying in an earlier video that any torque spec I give is for my particular vehicle, 2012 Corvette Grand Sport 6.2 LS3. And I said, if you have a different vehicle, don't assume that it's going to be the same torque specs. While yes, the torque specs for like the cylinder heads will be the same for most LS engines. But when it comes to something like, let's say, the power steering pump and the power steering pump bracket, I'll give you an example. The 4 bolts that hold the power steering pump on to the power steering pump bracket get torqued to 18 foot-pounds on an LS3 and an LS7. On an LS9, which is also a 6.2 liter, on an LS9, the 4 bolts that hold the power steering pump to the power steering pump bracket, those get torqued to 37 foot-pounds, which is also what the 4 larger bolts, like this one, get torqued to when you're attaching the bracket to the block. So again, don't just assume because I give a torque number that it's the same torque number for your vehicle. All vehicles are different. So on an LS3 and LS7, the 4 bolts for the power steering pump get torqued to 18 foot-pounds, and if you have an LS9, they get torqued to 37 foot-pounds. So that's why I just keep repeating lately. Don't just assume that these torque specs apply for all vehicles. Alright, what do I do next? Maybe I will do the water pump at this point. I had ordered, I didn't want to, I had ordered a new camshaft sensor. The sensor's fine, but the O-ring doesn't seem to be sealing properly because there was so much oil and road debris stuck to that oil right around this area. And obviously the O-ring that's on the camshaft sensor wasn't doing its job that great. And I tried desperately to find that O-ring. I even called AC Delco themselves. I called GM. And nobody could give me a part number or tell me where I could find that exact same size O-ring. I went to a local hardware store. They didn't have anything that worked, so I had to get a new sensor because that's the only way to get the O-ring. They don't come separate. So that's $50 I'm wasting over a 50 cents O-ring. So that should be here tomorrow. But the water pump shouldn't obstruct me from putting a new one in. Alright, so let me get started. I'll be back.